Hello and welcome to this episode of the P&E podcast. My name's Jack Jacob and I'm your host. In this episode, I'm joined by David Walliker, who's the Chief Digital and Partnerships Officer at Oxford University Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust. David and I have, in some parts, a very funny conversation and in other parts, a very serious conversation where we cover his life journey from underachieving in school by his standards to becoming one of the UK's, if not the world's, leading healthcare CIOs. The discussion covers David's leadership style, football allegiances, his Wenglish upbringing, and some of his bugbears. You'll find out more as we get to know the person behind the job title. Hi everyone, before we get into this conversation with David, just want to give a shout out to this episode's sponsor, Common Time. ICOM, a next-generation clinical communications app produced by Common Time, has demonstrated itself as the market-leading application to help replace aging bleep technology currently delivered by pagers, streamlining clinical communications whilst providing a secure and, most importantly, integrated clinical messaging tool that provides real-time instant messaging for all staff. Common Time understands the structure of NHS organisations. As such, ICOM allows its users to interact as individuals, in groups, or directly using their roles and responsibilities within their team. The application hosts impressive features that include automating workflows, escalating or diverting any undelivered or unactioned requests, as well as automating the booking of beds and operating theatres. Common Time are now working in partnership with 8 NHS trusts in helping them to achieve their overarching digital strategy. David, do you remember our first interaction?
I do. It was in Leeds, wasn't it? I think.
It was not in Leeds. It was. It
Where
was.
was
I sent you a video. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So I sent.
You stalked me, Jack. So I think it's what you're trying to say politely.
Well, you wasn't replying via email, so it had to be different. I sent you and probably about another. Let's just say you don't feel privileged. About 30 others. A digital.
That's less important people.
Yeah, that's it, mate. Yeah, definitely. A video invitation to. I think it was either our first or second event. It was definitely in 2018. And I can't remember if it was the first or second event. But I sent a video, basically unlisted videos on YouTube, sent them all directly on LinkedIn saying, "Hi, David, I've made a video for you. Please watch it," or worse to that effect. And basically just sent out a load of digital invites and said, we talk about digitalization and digital transformation. Well, here's your digital invite, blah, blah. And basically, you was the only one that replied to me.
Well, was that? Really?
Yeah, I know. And for the man that now never, ever comes back to me, I think it was the first and only time you replied. Yeah, you said to me, I like the innovative way that you've invited me, or I like the innovative way that you've approached this. Let me check my calendar and I'll come back to you. And guess what?
I never did I?
You never, ever came back to me. And the only reason that I think we actually eventually met was because of Jonathan Lofthouse. And because obviously you was working with him in Liverpool.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, because he was chairing the event that you first spoke at and so on. So there we go. If there's any event organisers looking to get hold of David on here, just make sure you know someone that he knows, because that's the only way you're getting him.
Well, yes, but, we'll come on to, I'm sure, what my dislike for all things email, Jack. But
indeed.
But the video, I remember showing people that video. It was very clever.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, it was really impressive. It's probably the most impressive piece of work you've done.
Can I call you an arse on this? Oops, too late. Well, anyway, let's talk a bit about you. So tell me about your life growing up. Where did you live, or where did you live, and schooling, etc.
Well, I lived and grew up, and in fact still do live now. I did the classic thing of leaving as soon as I was 18 and then coming back. But I grew up in North Wales, the northern half of North Wales, so an area that we like to call ourselves Wenglish, where we're Welsh, but we don't really sound Welsh, and we probably sound a bit more Scouse or Manc. And so I grew up there in rural North Wales with my brother and sister, and it was it was a lovely upbringing, but it was very uneventful. It was, as you can imagine, North Wales isn't the epicenter of the world, is it? It's if you want anything exciting to happen, you go in somewhere else.
Yeah.
But then on the reverse of that, we get Snowdonia and the countryside, and no, it was a good childhood. Enjoyed it. But as soon as I turned 18, I moved away. Thought I've got to go and work in a city. Got to go work in London. Love it there. And then came back very quickly because I hated it. And I've lived there all my adult life now as well.
Damn. So how did you find school then?
See, now I did find school mildly annoying, if I'm honest,
right?
Because I was neither. I found it, and this is going to sound wrong, so bear with me while I say this. I found it easy, and I didn't find it stimulating, and the style of learning didn't really engage me. They didn't have sort of practical type subjects or different ways of teaching in the 80s and 90s. I still had milk until Maggie Thatcher stole our milk, sort of thing in the in the 80s. And it was schooling was in the 80s and early 90s was just boring, Jack. And I didn't find it difficult. I didn't find it stretch me. I got a bit lazy with it because I wasn't really engaged in it. And yeah, and I think that sort of.
So were you academic, would you say?
I think I was a lot more academic than my grades would have suggested.
What was your grade set?
For GCSE, I had 2 Bs, 6 Cs, and a D.
What was the D in?
German.
But,
yeah.
Why German?
But with a surname like Walliker, you'd have thought I would probably been all right at German. But to be fair, I only did German to be in one particular girl's class. That was the logic behind that particular option in whatever old I was when I chose to take German.
This was before the days of social media where you had to choose German to get a girl instead of messaging them.
Well, I wanted to take her to the kino, and so I had a crush on her all the way from junior school, primary school, high school. Did German, failed German, never told her I had the crush on her.
So there we go. So you wasted.
Wasted
2 years. What year was it? Your last 2 years, I assume you'd have done your.
Yeah,
GCSE
2 years. But more importantly, an actual GCSE I wasted, didn't I? I could have done something more useful.
Yeah, well, no. To be fair, I'm sure your career hasn't depended on the grade you got in GCSEs.
No, that's very true. That's true.
So, you grew up in Wales. You refer to yourself as Wenglish. So. My immediate question, I know you like football, is do you support England or do you support Wales?
Well, both. And I'm not ashamed to say both. But I am Welsh, so therefore, if it was Wales-England, as it was at Euro 16, you might have won the game, but we got to the semi-finals. You lost to Iceland. Then I would be supporting Wales.
Makes sense.
But I grew up, my mum and dad are... they're very British. They're proud to be British. So when I was brought up, I wasn't brought up and differentiated as in this is Welsh, this is English, this is Scottish,
right,
and everything else. It was just it was nothing. We were just British. It wasn't anything. There was no conversation about it. So when I watched the 1986 World Cup, for example, and I was watching England play World Cup, how old was I in 1986? 9 years old, 10 years old, wasn't going to be able to work out that England wasn't Britain. They were away from the Union Jacks in the crowd. So I grew up supporting England in major football tournaments.
Well, to be fair, just to interject, you didn't really have much choice, did you? There wasn't much Welsh involvement in major footballing tournaments back then.
No, that is very true. Yes. Well, no, we could have got to the 1994 World Cup if Bowen could take a penalty, and we had a few close shaves, didn't we? So I support both. I get, but emotionally, it's more Wales. Yeah.
Do you get stick for supporting both? From actually both sides, I suppose, but certainly from the Welsh side.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't really great. I wouldn't wear like a Wales shirt and then the next day wear an England shirt.
Yeah.
I certainly never wear a half and half scarf. I'm not one of them. I'm not a wrong one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
No problem.
but I don't understand. I've never quite subscribed to the logic that you have to demonstrate your loyalty to one football team or one rugby team by showing your hatred towards another one.
Mm.
That's not, to me, displaying the loyalty. But for me, you know, we're all British.
Yeah, of course.
I support us all. I mean, the last Euros was almost a dream because everyone, well, Scotland weren't there, were they? I mean, we say about Wales not qualifying for major tournaments. I think Scotland have got a while to go, haven't they? But, you know, I'll support all the home nations.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. So you must love the Olympics then.
Oh, well, who doesn't love an Olympics? Yeah,
of course. So saying that though, you're well. What obviously we've got the connection that we're both Tottenham fans. So how do you grow up in North Wales and then support Tottenham? Because the logical thing would be that you support Man United or probably not Man City, but Man United or Liverpool.
Well, yeah, and I suppose that's the thing. When I was growing up, everyone did support Everton, Liverpool, or Man United. I mean, let's be honest, the 1980s, late 70s, 80s Liverpool fans were the original glory supporters, weren't they?
You're only saying this because you've left Liverpool now and work in Oxford.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in a safe zone now. But you know, and I wanted, I did, you know, I wanted to support a slightly different team. And we used to live close to Mike England, who played for the '61 double winning team, and was the Welsh manager actually in the '80s before Terry Orriff took over. And I think that's what drove me to it. It was like, well, and we were a good team. You know, we did. My first game that I remember watching, the Tottenham game, first one, was the '82 FA Cup final replay. I was only 5. Coming on 6. What's the replay on a whatever night that would have been?
Back in the day, they had two finals, didn't they? They had a home and away final, didn't they?
Oh no, not in the FA Cup. That's just because we kept drawing them.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah, so we just had to have replays. We had QPR, wasn't it, in '81 with Villa, and then it was QPR in '82. Which was Terry Venables was manager of QPR, as a fact for you.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, you know, he went from QPR to Barcelona, a demonstration in life that your career can only go up.
Yeah, literally. How do you do that? Go from QPR to Barcelona? That's mad.
Well, you don't anymore, do you? Can you imagine?
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course.
You go from QPR to Charlton now, if you're lucky, wouldn't you?
Well, Rafa went from Real Madrid to Newcastle, didn't he?
That's true, actually. Yeah, that's true. But there's been some great Welsh Tottenham players. Remember? Bale.
Yeah, of course.
Gunther.
Well, to be fair though,
Pat Van der Now.
But Bale, you would have had to have a time machine to realise he'd have played for Tottenham when you was 5 when you started supporting them. So
over the years. Yeah, over the years.
Say that again, sorry.
Over the years, we've had some great Welsh Tottenham players.
Yeah, indeed. So moving on then. So like, what did you want to do when you was growing up?
Oh, sports journalist.
Right. Okay. So it was a big passion of yours, sports in general.
Yeah. All sports. I mean, I used to. My dad used to. I never saw him during the week because he was working, like most dads did then.
Yeah.
And then every Saturday he'd go out and basically he was going down the snooker club. And he was just going to the pub and playing snooker with his mates on a Saturday afternoon, wasn't it? And I used to sit from like 12 o'clock till 5 o'clock every Saturday watching Grandstand, thinking that my dad was going to come on the snooker. Because I thought he was going to come on in the snooker on Grandstand. So I grew up watching Grandstand every Saturday afternoon, waiting for my dad to go on telly, not realising he was just down the pub with Uncle Clive having a few jars. So I sort of grew up. I dislike all sports, to be honest.
Yeah.
I watch anything that's a bit competitive. So yeah, that's how really the sort of sports sessions come about.
So what did you end up? What was your first job then?
First job was, well, I started my A levels, and I think again this sort of reflects my sort of lack of planning in life. I want to be a sports journalist. I tell my career advisor I want to be a sports journalist. So I start my A levels in economics, geography, and history. You know, not year 3 classic journalist.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Courses, you know, not an English in there. And of course, because I hadn't weighted a GCSE on any of those, I'd passed them all as well. So I could have done an English A-level. So I started my A-levels like September 93 or 94, all blurs into one. And then I saw a job advertised for an apprenticeship, optical engineer, mechanical engineering apprenticeship. And I thought, well, my dad does engineering. And I wanted to earn money at this point. You know, I was just about to start my driving lessons. You want to buy, back then, you know, I wanted to buy a Nova SR. I wanted a car. I wanted to be able to start going out.
Yeah.
So I applied for this job, and it was quite an interesting interview because it was my first ever job interview, and it was, you know, it was an engineering company, and as part of the interview process, you had to take something you'd made.
Right.
But I'd never made anything because I'd never, you know, I wasn't practical, and I didn't even do CDT for GCSE. You know, I'd never even sawn anything.
Yeah.
So I got my dad to make me a display cabinet for trophies.
Right.
And then took the display cabinet with me and gave a presentation about the display cabinet, about how it was to put my trophies in it, that from sport, so it had a story to it as well.
Hold on a sec. You took a cabinet, like a trophy case cabinet, to an interview.
Yeah. Well, it was a show and tell type interview. You were invited to bring something you've made. I'm sure most other people brought something small. And
I just have to interject again. If anyone is going to be interviewed by David Walliker for any role in the future, please turn up to his office with a cabinet.
but Jack, that's not even the worst part of the story, is it? The worst part of the story is I turned up with the cabinet and I hadn't even made it. Right? So then I get a job as an apprentice engineer, and it was 3 days in college and 2 years on the shop floor. And I wasn't even 17 until 3 months later. And so I got home, realised I got the job, and said to my dad, well, you better tell me how to make something like that now. So I went on a sort of crash course to actually learn how to make things.
Do you reckon it was just because of your communication skills from like an early age that you got that then?
I guess so.
Was the cabinet incredibly made just by your dad?
Oh, the cabinet was all right. I think it was the story that went with it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, but I don't. The thing is, you don't know. I mean, job interviews are a funny thing anyway, aren't they? Because you don't know who you're up against. And it's not like you're appointing. If you're appointing a very senior person, you're gonna appoint the best person you can get, aren't you? This was a trainee. I mean, it was called an apprenticeship, but it was not apprenticeships anywhere near what they mean nowadays. You know, apprenticeship nowadays are vocations. You almost get a university degree just off the apprenticeship. This was like youth training scheme with a different name on, wasn't it?
Right.
So it might have been that everybody else was just absolutely dreadful.
It was just a way to pay everyone absolute pittance for 3 years while they trained, basically.
Yeah, but enough, when I was 16 years old, it was my first pay packet was after tax. It was £75 a week. £75 a week when you're 16 and no mortgage.
Yeah.
It was a lot of money.
Yeah, of course. Well, back in that day, of course it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So they drop you on the shop floor, show you how to do it, train you, go through some rough health and safety, and then that's it. You just crack on. And I did struggle because, as I say, I hadn't been practical and I hadn't really tested myself in school. I hadn't stretched myself. I'd been within my comfort zone. So when I say it was easy, maybe that's the wrong choice of word.
Yeah.
I didn't find it was testing me. So I became a bit mentally lazy. And then I'm thrust into an environment, I'm a 17 or 16, 17-year-old lad in a shop floor full of 30, 40-year-old men doing a profession that I've blagged an interview for, probably for the wrong reasons. This is their livelihoods and I'd done it to earn some money for the beer. And going to college to study maths and physics and the engineering disciplines, I struggled, but you adapt, you knuckle down, you think, well, I've either got to nail this or I've got to put my hands up and say I can't do it. And I thought, well, I don't want to quit. So put my head down and sort of started really, I wouldn't say I was starting to get brilliant at it, but I was starting to become competent engineer, starting to get some qualifications behind me. And then I got injured playing rugby and hurt my back. And, as you know, Jack, the one thing I'm not short of is height.
Yeah.
So
Say, how tall are you?
6'7" 3/4. Same height as Peter Crouch, 9 stone heavier.
I heard a podcast the other day. Harry Redknapp was on Peter Crouch's podcast, and when I can't remember what, but Harry signed him. I think it might have been at QPR. It might not. I don't think it actually was. Can't remember. But anyway, the chairman at the time said, "Why am I buying a basketball player?"
Yeah,
So go on. So you said you hurt your back, yeah?
So I hurt my back, and because the Foggo was the name of the lad that worked on the shift opposite us. He was called Foggo because his name was Foggo. So it was quite an ill thought out nickname. And so Foggo worked out on the opposite shift. I'm 6'7", and he was I think he was like 4'9" or something, 5 foot. You know, very short. And the problem was is that they needed to raise the machine for me because of the injury to my back. But if they did that, then it was too high for Foggo. So they said, well, you're going to have to go and work in IT for a couple of months while your back sorts itself out. So I went upstairs to, what was proper back office then.
Yeah.
And went up to the IT department thinking, all right, here we go, 2 months up here. That was the summer of '96. So bring it back to football. That was the week that that we beat the Dutch 4-1 at the Euros.
I love how you said we. I love how you said we.
Well, the funny thing about that was, of course, we were 4-0 up before the Dutch scored, and that goal knocked the Scottish out, didn't it? Which is, sums up Scottish luck in football. And so that week it was, and I went up thinking, well, I'll be here for a couple of months, and 24 years later, here I am.
Yeah, well, there we go. Well, I'll come to your kind of career in a sec. But before I move on to that, I want to talk about because I want to go quite in depth in terms of kind of your journey to becoming a CIO or a chief digital officer. Before I move on to that, I want to talk about some of your bugbears because I know you've got a few, and I know you've got a particular one about your name.
Oh, yes.
So, what is your name?
David.
And what is not your name?
Dave.
Right. So for anyone that works in, say, health, is it like a health tech supplier, and you start an email with Dave or a conversation with Dave, you're going to not make a sale, because I made the mistake of calling him Dave, which I was very quickly reminded, my name is David.
It is. Well, I didn't speak to my mum for 2 weeks during COVID lockdown because she called me Dave. I'm quite consistent on this.
So what is it about Dave that annoys you?
Well, there's lots of things, Jack. But I'm christened David. David is my name. So Dave's just like a lazy way of saying it, isn't it? But it reminds me of Only Fools and Horses. With Rodney. He's like, you're right, Dave.
We're going to be millionaires, Dave. I know we're going to be millionaires, Rodney, isn't it?
It's like, and I've got nothing against people who are called Dave. Don't get me wrong, I think Dave's a great name, but it's not my name. My name's David. So it has to be David. And it just bothers me because, I've got a surname which I have to constantly spell that gets misspelt all the time, random letters added, random letters removed. So you get used to having to spell your surname.
See, I find your surname really, it's like, it just as it sounds, Walliker.
Yeah, but some people put a C in there, so they think I'm a wall licker.
Ah, right, wall licker, yeah.
And apparently I'm not. Don't like the taste of concrete.
Dusty mouth.
Okay. So no, but I think that is just the number one bugbear, because I think it's quite important. My parents christened me. I've grown up with that name. You should call me that name. Your name's Jack. You wouldn't like it if I just suddenly called you Steve, would you?
No, but everyone loves to put an S on the end of my name, Jack Jacobs. And
one's enough.
Oh, it's so annoying because my name and my granddad died probably when I was, I don't know, maybe 12, 13, something like that. But one thing that's always stuck with him, he hated being called Mr. Jacobs. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but so I completely resonate with you about the name thing, because just a small change, but highly, highly annoying because it's quite simply not, So what other bugbears have you got?
Oh, I've got a few. I mean, they're a bit, they're personal bugbears, aren't they? They're things that are unique to you that,
yeah,
so they might not resonate necessarily, but I think milk bottles, Jack. If I'm honest, milk bottle lids.
Right, go on. Where are you going with this? Because I am like, I wasn't expecting milk bottles to get mentioned here.
Well, right. It just drives me absolutely bonkers that we can't have some universal colouring agreement for milk bottle tops. Right now, you're going to say, but we do, Dave. Right?
We do. We've got green, blue, and red.
Yes, that's fine if you just want full fat milk, semi-skim milk, or whatever the other one is, right?
Yeah.
But when
what's the red
1%
one?
milk,
The red one's what's that one? Is that the 1% one?
I don't know because I don't drink them. You see, right? So I have 1% milk,
Right.
and 1% milk is a different lid colour in Sainsbury's to Tesco's to Co-op to Morrison's. Every single one's got a different colour lid. So I end up having to pick up the milk bottle because I can never remember which shop I'm in. Which one, what colour. It's not like I've dedicated myself to remembering this. I'm not going to go on mastermind with a specialist subject of milk bottle product. So I have to. There's only so much space in your mind palace, isn't there? So then you've got to lose something. I'm not going to remember milk bottle colour lid. So I seem to spend an inordinate amount of time in supermarkets reading labels, going, "Oh no, that's semi-skimmed. Oh no,
what other colours are there? Maybe it's because I don't drink any other milk than semi-skim milk, and the kids, Nala, has full fat. So the only what other colours are there apart from red?
Well, there's your universal red, green, blue. So full fat blue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Green is semi-skimmed, and red will be. I don't know what red is. I mean, I presume it's anyway. Mine's different. Maybe mine is red in one of the supermarkets. Maybe that's why I've thrown it in. You know what I mean? It's just mildly annoys me. One of my first things if I become Prime Minister would be to make sure it's universal. The colour top of milk bottle top. I think it's that important, honestly. And then I would probably move on to packets of crisps that put salt and vinegar as green. Salt and vinegar should be blue. But
that's Walker's is green. I think you've got to go as Walker's is going to be as the standard colour.
No, Walker's are just wrong. Salt and vinegar is blue.
Is McCoy's salt and vinegar blue?
I think McCoy, yeah. I don't know.
Pringles is because the green one's
sweet cream,
chive, isn't it?
Chive and sour cream and chive, isn't it? Yeah. But I just find with milk bottle tops, I just find it really annoying. I just think, what's the point if they're not all the same?
Well, there we go. Just drink a normal milk and then you won't have the issue.
Well, there is that. I'm not entirely sure why I had to have 1% milk. Maybe maybe I've got a bit of lactose intolerance, but only 1% worth.
Talk to me about your email box as well, because I know that when I speak to people with a similar job title to you, CIOs and so on, I actually turn that. I think anyone that's a senior leader within an NHS trust, not just applicable to senior IT leaders, but you are absolutely hounded. Your email box is peppered, isn't it?
Oh, it's incessant, mate. And I wouldn't mind, but half of them I try and unsubscribe from them.
How many emails do you get a day? Just like that from everyone, from people in your trust, people trying to sell to you, things they need advice on, etc. How many roughly emails do you get a day?
I'd say at least 300 to 400 a day.
Oh, and
well, I'll tell you now, Jack. I'll tell you now. It's a Thursday today, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on Tuesday morning, I got my mailbox down to 0, unread.
Yep.
Not by reading them, just right mouse click, mark all the correct.
Control A, delete, or Control O, mark red.
So that was Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Right, so that's 2 working days later, and I've got 651 unreads now.
Plus the ones that you have read.
Plus the ones I have read, plus the ones I have responded to. So I've had 700 to 800 emails in the last 2 days.
Jeez. So quite a lot then.
Yeah.
And how many of those do you think have to be replied to, like as a percentage? So you get 300-400 a day. How many of those do you think have to be replied to or need to be replied to?
Half a dozen, if that.
Really? So in terms of, let's say suppliers that have solutions, I think the audience will be a mixture of people like yourself, senior leaders within the NHS and others in the NHS, but also, suppliers to the NHS as well. Perhaps an opportunity to give them a bit of advice. Like, what's the best way of communicating with you? Because I think the long and short of it is a lot of people do certainly believe they do, but in many cases do actually have solutions that can help massively reduce costs or improve efficiencies or whatever buzzword else you want to throw at it. But especially now because of COVID, where there is a need for a new normal. I know that cold calling wouldn't work because I'm pretty sure you've got my number saved and you never answer the phone to me, let alone a number that isn't saved in your phone. So cold calling, let's just rule that angle out. Emailing you get absolutely hounded. So it's, realistically going to be like finding a needle in a haystack in terms of getting a reply from you for a supplier. So, how should suppliers engage with you?
Well, it's a tough one, that, isn't it? Because, as you say, you've got a product that you think I can benefit from. I might need that product. I might not need that product. You don't know that. I might not have the money to buy it, even if I do need it, or I might not have the resources or capacity to be able to deliver it, even if I had the money and I needed it. So there has to be sort of 6, 7, 8 things that have to align before a conversation progresses. And then, of course, remember, you're bogged down a little bit there when you get into NHS procurement recs. So you can't just pick up the phone and go, oh, do you know, it's a really good solution. Love it, I'll buy it. You've got to be able to demonstrate your value for money in your market testing and your evaluation, etc. And we can have an opinion on whether that stifles innovation or not. But, the rules are there. So it's very rare that you can just buy something anyway, even in a scenario where all the circumstances align and match up. And I do respect the fact that salespeople have, it's a tough job. You judge on your last quarter or your last reporting period. You've got bills to pay. You've got ambitions in life. You've got a boss breathing down your neck. You've got a solution which I can, but it's just a bit bland and boring to send an email, isn't it? And then to send another email 2 days later to say you're checking up whether I've seen the first one. There's a good chance I didn't.
They get filed for me, those ones in the B1N folder.
Well, yeah, I don't know is the right answer, because the thing is you go to some of the conferences, general conferences now, and the suppliers just they whip out the cards and they've got these products and they want to speak to you, and it's not that you're just saying it to get them away. You just don't have the time. And this is why I think the issue is, if I got a problem, I will go out and seek and find answers to my problem. That doesn't mean that I think that I know everything. So therefore, if I don't know it's a problem, it's not, or that there's not a better way of doing it. And maybe it's just about, and I'm not saying it because I'm on your podcast, Jack, but, it's your sort of events where really that bridges the gap between the two. Because I can sit there and go, oh, yeah, that's a different way of doing something. I can hear other people have done it. You can bridge that, you can have that relationship, you can have that conversation. And then actually, when an email comes in from somebody you've met and you've eyeballed and you've seen and you've referenced, it's going to gain a little bit more importance in my sort of, oh, I must respond to that, than, okay, someone's offered me that they can change the world. And so I think it's about building some form of relationship, but don't give up on the cold emails. I joke about them, but, and yeah, they're annoying. But I have bought things from them before, and, you can't always line up to different ways of doing it. And I would rather, at least I know that I'm going to get a certain percentage of my emails to junk emails. For Blimey O'Reilly, don't shift from emails to direct messaging me on Twitter or something, because it'll be like, oh God, I'm going to start muting direct replies. Keep chugging away, really. But
I can see you, like, you've dug yourself a hole here and you're rambling to get out, thinking, oh no, what have I done? They're not going to email me. They're not going to call me. So now my like social media space is going to get hounded.
Yeah, I'm at Matthew Hancock.
Oh, brilliant. Talk to me about some of your first leadership role. So you was your first role within the NHS? Was it for Cheshire and Wirral?
Cheshire Rural Mental Health, yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. So was that your first job in for the NHS, or was that your first ever job?
Oh no, that was 10 years after my first IT job, but it was my first job in the NHS.
Yeah.
And I applied for it because at the time there was lots of media coverage about the National Programme for IT and how bad it was, specifically. And I saw this job come up and I thought, well, it can't be as bad as they're saying. And it was a 2-year fixed term contract when I originally applied for it, which, you know, to come from a substantive jobs to fixed term. But I thought, well, I'm going to go and see how good it is. Can you make a difference, etc. Went on a 2-year fixed term contract. And just immediately fell in love with the NHS, really. And within 6 months of being there, the contract had been made substantive, and 16, 17 years later, here I am.
Yeah, you've never left since.
No, but I wouldn't leave now.
No. Well, I was going to ask this a bit later, but perhaps I'll ask it now, and then I'll come back to the point I'm going to make about. I want to ask you about kind of your first leadership roles and stuff. But as you've mentioned it, so you could clearly probably earn more in the private sector as a CIO, with the responsibility that you've got, with the size of the organization that it is, so money mustn't be your driver. What is it about the NHS that's kept you loyal for so long?
Well, let's be honest, money isn't my driving factor, no, but on the same token, I wouldn't come to work and do it for free. So, there is a financial consideration. I think it's, I've worked for engineering companies, I've worked for transport companies, I've worked for financial companies before I came into the NHS, where essentially the driving purpose of those organisations was to maximise profit for its shareholders and return that in dividends for those people who invested in the stocks of those companies. And it was great. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the money I was earning when I was in the private sector. But the NHS, it gives you a purpose. It gives you a sense of achievement. Some of the stuff that we've done, whether it be, let's pick something for COVID, because that's fresh in everybody's mind at the moment. But, we deployed, this isn't rocket science type digital stuff, but, deployed at pace the patient entertainment solution so that the patients could FaceTime or the equivalent of a vendor's products, video home, because obviously we weren't allowed visitors into the hospital. That wasn't particularly difficult, apart from securing the kit during the middle of a pandemic when everyone's ordering a lot of kit. But the sense of hearing the first video call with a grandparent was a video call in her grandchildren that she hadn't seen for 3 weeks, and the shrieks of delight on the kids on the other side, or arranging a family to be able to say goodbye to their loved ones on the video piece, gives you a sense of purpose that you're doing something more wholesome than lining the pockets necessarily of shareholders. And the ethos of the NHS and its place in our social conscience, I think, is very special. And so for all the tea in China, I wouldn't leave the NHS.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think you've put that really nicely, and you've given a really nice example there of why you do that. So going back to what we was talking about before then. So you worked at Cheshire and Rural Mental Health Trust or Partnership. When was you in a leadership role there, or did you evolve into a leadership role from there?
When I originally went, it was as a technical project manager to deploy their electronic patient record system. 2004, March 2004, I started.
Yep.
When I originally went there, they didn't have an IM&T function as such, or an informatics function. They had that outsourced to the different organisations that existed back then. So in certain areas of the patch, it was covered by one PCT, and another by another PCT, and another by a health informatics service. And there was no internal informatics function. So the brief that I was given was build this electronic patient record, deploy it. But what became quickly apparent was, well, you can put that in, but you need people to be able to develop it, to be able to take the data out of it, to be able to do stuff with it, to be able to support the organisation. So it became obvious very quickly that the trust needed its own internal IM&T function, and then the role morphed into the head of IT, in effect, to create that department, which was, it's a dream role, because I was given a bunch of money. I was given an empty, nice office block set of offices, and I was told to recruit a IT department, and we did it from scratch.
Oh,
And
that's amazing.
so we did that for sort of a couple of years. I was head of IT, and a colleague of mine was head of sort of information. And then he left to go somewhere. I can't remember where he went now. It's so long ago. But he left. So I sort of approached my director, and I was like, "Well, you don't need to replace him. Give me both." So I came head of informatics.
Salary with that then? Did you get both salaries?
You wish. But yeah. So I became a head of service in 2006. So yeah. And then it's
go back a sec. What an incredible first role within the NHS.
Quite.
You're given
I'm totally lucky that.
Go on, David. It's yours.
Yeah, I mean, and this is about life sometimes, isn't it? There's a sliding doors moment about why did I pick up the Jobs Northwest that particular week, because that's how you did it back then. There was no online jobs website. So I'd bought Jobs Northwest, saw this job in the NHS, and thought, I'm going to apply for that, and applied. I mean, to be honest, when I was invited for the interview, I'd kind of forgotten I'd applied, because it'd been quite a while between the application and the shortlisting.
What, the NHS being slow to react? Never.
You can't say that anymore, Jack. Can't say that. Look at COVID. Look at the COVID response.
We're going to get onto COVID.
Yeah. So, and then it's about life's always about being in the right place at the right time, isn't it?
Definitely.
But then there's luck in life, but then there's also you drive your own luck. So the opportunity came up to have the conversation and say, well, can I do both and become the head of informatics? But if I hadn't done a good job at the head of IT role, that conversation wouldn't have gone very far, would it? So, you take the opportunities when they present themselves in life, but then you've got to position yourselves to be considered for them as well.
Yeah, makes sense. And so just before that then, so just so I understand the complete, so was you an IT PM before, or was you a coder? What was your tech background?
Well, I started off when I went to when I did my apprenticeship, I did 2 years in optical engineering, and then I injured myself playing rugby, hurt my back. So I went up to the IT department while my back recovered. That was in the summer of 1996.
Yeah.
I went up there and I never came back. So my first job was as a network or as a help desk analyst. Then it morphed into a network analyst. Then I came to London or down south and did more network and security type roles. That then morphed into sort of more server. This was at the point when really NT4 was coming out of life and modern Windows operating systems were coming in. Moved into the server space, and then did one role as a project manager before I applied for the Cheshire and Wirral role as a technical project manager.
Sure. So what was that, working on like Cisco equipment and things like that before?
Yeah, I mean, but the only thing that really exists still that I was working on was the layer 3 type switches. I mean, although saying that, the first network I installed was a BNC type connection, which I'm not sure if you know what a BNC connection is, but you wouldn't recognise it with your current network connection. So, my first job in IT was deploying Windows 95. This is going back. So I got reasonably good technical backing in network skills, security, and servers. But if you put me in front of any of those now, because the world's moved on a bit, then I would probably struggle. And because my first director, Jack, he was a guy called Mike, and he was quite an inspiration, really. He's one of those people that they often say you remember your best bosses, and I certainly remember Mike. He was both intimidating and inspiring at the same time, and he had sort of Schofield type silver hair, and he'd been in the business for years and years and years. He had a 3-digit British Computer Society membership number. This is back the original 60s when they started, or probably early when it started. The man was a legend. But although we all respected him and we looked up to him, we didn't take the mick in a horrible way, but we used to call him Mainframe Mike, because he had grown up in the 70s and 80s on technology that we didn't recognize at this point, because here was us deploying 32-bit operating systems. We thought we were the bomb. And so we used to say, well, that's Mainframe Mike. And the technology now has moved on so much from where I started from. I'm probably Mainframe Mike.
No, you're probably Windows 95 Walliker.
WALL.
Awesome. So jumping from there back to kind of then your first leadership role, or just past. So you went from Cheshire and Wirral. Did you go into the Welsh Ambulance Service from there?
Yeah, I went to ambulance service from there for a number of reasons. I mean, one, I'd been at CWP at that point for about 6 years, and that's quite a long time. I like to work on bring everything back to football, but I like to work on 4-year cycles.
Okay.
Because I think 4 years is how long it takes to go in somewhere, identify what the problems are, come up with a plan, deploy what you're doing, and then start making a difference. And I don't like to leave anyone until I've made a difference necessarily.
Yeah.
But I was outgrowing the role at CWP, and I'd applied for a couple of jobs, speculative, and I'd got to the final 2 in each on interviews, and they were sort of band 9 jobs. And each time I hadn't got the job because they were saying that it was too much of a, and I don't know how accurate this is, they could have just been polite, of course I could have just bombed the interview, but they were saying it was too much of a jump from the band I was on at the time to a 9. There was a concern about that.
What band was you on at the time then?
I was on an 8B. As a head of informatics.
Band what, sorry?
An 8B.
Right, okay.
So, and I wanted the band 9, associate director or director type roles. I was also aware of the fact that because I had got mental health at this stage, it was almost, it was very difficult to try and penetrate the acute sector. So the jobs I was applying and getting shortlisted for were mental health jobs or community roles. And then I took the move to Welsh Ambulance because it was a sideways move in the context of it was no longer the information or the performance or the data, and it was purely IT ops. But it was a higher band, and it was a national role. So one, it cited me with the context of an ambulance is fundamentally operationally driven. If the radio system goes down, that's kind of a big problem, sort of thing. So I quite like that pressure that comes with those sorts of working environments, as opposed to the mental health trust, which was a little bit, less pressured with regards to the ops piece. But also it was a higher banded role. So my intention was, well, if I can go there and enjoy it and get the development and prove myself that I can operate at that level, then the band 9 jobs aren't suddenly a big gap.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went there with the intention of staying for, as I say, for the 4 years. But while I was about 2.5 years in, the CIO role came up at Liverpool Women's Hospital. Went for it, got it, and that was the end of my Welsh ambulance career.
Was that because to me, so was your job title the National IT Manager in the Welsh?
Yeah, it was National ICT Operations Manager, which was the equivalent of Associate Director of IT.
Okay.
At the time.
Yeah. So,
but each trust always has different naming conventions, don't they, for the same job?
Yeah, of course. Well, actually, we'll get onto the naming convention because I want to understand what your job title means, because you've got, as far as I know, a completely unique job title to you and Oxford. But we'll get onto that in a sec. So, was that a big jump from going from an AD level IT director or a national IT manager to a CIO, or is it just perhaps the chief part of the job title that makes it seem that way?
Bit of both, really. It wasn't a big jump in competency. There's a higher expectation, or there was on the CIO role at the Women's with regards to, it was operating just below board level. So reporting into the director of finance, and, she was amazing, and I'm still in contact with her now. But she was a tough taskmaster. You could give her whatever you gave her came back with a red pen on it. She was very prescriptive in what she wanted. So there was probably higher standards of the quality of some of the reports and the narrative and the assurance that was required to be provided. But from a competency perspective, no, not really. I think the thing that I found difficult was I had gone from a mental health trust where I had the information and the IT to an ambulance service where I only had the IT, to now my first acute role where I had the IT and the information, but had never worked in acute information before. And they're different data sets and different, I'd never had to work until my role at the Women's with things like clock stop rules and 18-week pathways and all that sort of stuff. So there was a knowledge curve that I had to go through. But at the end of the day, a data set for one function is no more complex than a data set for another. It's just a different set of skills. So I wouldn't say it was too big a jump, and technically it was equitable.
Sure. So that wasn't the joint role at that point. Now that was just the women's, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it was just the women's 2013 when I started there. And then the opportunity came up again. It's about being in the right place at the right time, isn't it? So the CIO of the Royal Liverpool, James Norman, who's now at Dell as their CIO at Dell, he left the Royal Liverpool March-April 2014. Their chief executive had sent an email around all the chief executives in Liverpool to say, is anybody interested in having a joint appointment to the CIO? My director of finance and chief executive forwarded that on and said, that sounds a good idea. That'd be good for you and good for us. So I expressed a interest in it. And then nothing happened. It went really quiet for about 6-7 months. And then just Christmas 2014, early December 2014, the Royal came over and said, right, how can we make a joint role work? And then I started in January 2015.
Makes sense. Awesome. So talk to me about kind of leadership there and what it means for you, because I think, I don't know. I know you in the sense of, I'd like to say that we're friends now. We've worked together and collaborated on a number of my events, but we have a mutual connection in Tottenham, and we talk a lot about that and text a lot about that and other things. But I can't imagine, what are you like as a leader? What's your leadership style?
Well, I'm not somebody that stands at the end of people's desk and points fingers and demands. I'm very much. My belief is that you empower people to be able to do the job to the best of their ability. I see my role to provide the cover for the staff to be able to, one, develop, two, flourish, and three, make mistakes. Because you can't learn without making mistakes. And I think that the part of the privilege that comes with having the chief at the front of your job title, or as a senior leader, actually, it's not even a chief, this applies throughout, is, if something goes wrong, then I'll take the flak for it. But my job is to make sure that it kind of doesn't go wrong. And I think, for me, leadership is really quite simple. It is in my principles. I think leadership itself is hard. But fundamentally, leadership is about identifying the potential in people they haven't identified in themselves yet, and giving a structure and an operating model that enables both the individual to do the best, the department to do the best, and the organisation to do the best. You can't necessarily choose your boss, but you can choose who you follow. And I think I like to think that's my leadership style. So I like to think I'm there if they require the help. I will provide guidance if they seek it. Of course, there's times when I'm going to stop things. Or, well, that's a bad idea. Let's stop that. But I'm not. I would say I'm a developer of people. And I've had four of my last 5 direct reportees are now CIOs or deputy CIOs.
Yeah, that's
so I like to think it works.
Yeah, I think you summarised that really nicely. And do you go? You mentioned the point that was the major point, and actually, for my last podcast with James Devine, he said something very similar to you. It's about seeing something in someone that they don't see in themselves currently. So do you go to a point where you tell them what you see, or do you leave it for them to work that out for themselves and just give them a framework for them to do that?
I would say more the latter than the former. Fundamentally, if somebody's got areas of development that's below where it's expected to be for their role, whether that's emotional intelligence or technical skills or written skills or communication skills, I think this is where an effective appraisal system and development cycle and talent management comes in, isn't it? Is to be able to sit down and say, look, do you know what? This is everything you've done on this, let's say, project. Everything you've done on this project is brilliant, but this report doesn't quite cut it. So, but it's about managing those people's expectations so that you're not just giving them a report back covered in red pen and saying redo it. And it's like running over 10 miles Marines. They run around with their backpacks on and they get to the end and then the colonel goes, running over 10 miles. Yeah. It's not that sort of push and drive piece. I think you need to be able to constructively help people. But I think it's also enabling people to feel confident enough in a psychological safe space enough to grow into their own skin in the role, in effect, and learn what they're good at and what they're not good at. Because one of the key things for me in management, rather than leadership, is always appoint people that report into you that are better than you are. And so I know what my skills are, and I know what I'm less good at. So I'm not a particular good. It's probably in English, but I'm not particularly a great wordsmith. So I know I can write a great strategy, but I need somebody else to be able to take that and translate it into something that means something to everybody else. I don't have that skill set. So if I'm appointing somebody that is to lead, a strategic review, I'm going to appoint somebody that's got better skills in that area than I have. And also, it's about the talent management and succession planning. I think it's really important. I like to think that, in 3 years' time, when I've been at Oxford for, 3.5 years' time, and I've been there for 4 years, I'd like to think that there'll be at least 1, 2, or 3 people who could confidently apply for and get my job if I was to leave. And if there aren't those people there, then I think I will have failed.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of looking at it. I think it's a really, really good way of looking at it. So in Liverpool, you achieved so much, and I actually watched a YouTube video that you put on, and knowing you, I don't know how comfortable you would have been doing it, but it was quite good actually. It looked like, was it
quite good actually? Is that a tacit compliment there, Jack?
Yeah, I think that knowing you, did you do a video in front of like a green screen and then use like pointing to the left corner and on in this side we've achieved this and it means that we've done that? Do you remember recording that video? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Do I remember recording it? I still have nightmares about it.
Yeah, see, I knew that you wouldn't have enjoyed that, but I thought it come across brilliantly, and it was 3 years ago. It was 2017, I think that was. So probably, I don't know when it was recorded in 2017, but around 3 years ago. And I thought that we're actually for 3 years ago, how much the times have changed. That was bloody brilliant. And it goes through 3 years ago, what you've achieved and what you're planning to achieve, and the tone that you were setting basically for the next kind of 18 months. So yeah, you achieved a lot. What are some of the kind of major, most things you're proud of that you achieved, in Liverpool?
Well, there's so much, but I think the collective major success that we had, because it's not my success,
of course,
it's just my name on the top of it. I don't think there was anything I personally did individually that drove something through. I was very lucky in Liverpool to have a very good team around me, but I think it was probably the sepsis. We had an issue in the hospital where we weren't in the upper percentile for either discovering which patients required the antibiotics within the 1 hour or administrating the antibiotics. And at the time, I must profess, when the whole sepsis thing came up, I remember watching a QI, a quality improvement presentation about it in the trust. And I genuinely didn't know what sepsis was. I thought sepsis was like I thought that's what did Bob Marley. I thought it was like when you get an infection in the wound. I didn't know anything about it. It wasn't something that appeared on my radar. And of course, it was getting lots more prevalence at the time and discussion. And we watched this presentation about why, as an organisation, we were struggling. And we had a very inspiring consultant of infectious disease at the trust at the time, who basically wanted to transform the pathway for how we delivered sepsis care in the hospital. And it was such a compelling, inspiring presentation. The board, we signed up to it, and he started implementing these quality improvement, service improvements around it. And then when we were watching it, we thought, well, hang on a minute, we've got some technology here that was already being successfully deployed as part of the paper free that we can adapt a little bit to help you here. It's an often quoted statement, but it's often quoted because it's true. You can digitize a bad process, but you're just going to make a bad process quicker. This guy had gone through and redesigned a really effective pathway and a process and people and skills, but didn't have the effective technology at the end. So we designed him the effective technology that plunked on the top of it. And then the thing blew. It was bonkers. We went from, lowest percentiles to highest percentiles. We had research studies done on it, and ultimately it was quoted as a reference study in the long-term plan.
Wow. And how many lives did you save with it?
Well, I believe the research would indicate a couple of hundred.
Wow. It's incredible. It's an incredible
You
achievement.
know, but again, you know, you feel privileged because my role is to give the clinicians the tools that helps them make informed decisions about their patients. It's never going to replace the doctor. You know, this idea that we're going to end up with a bunch of robot doctors, you know, it's preposterous. But we need to be able to inform the doctors. All the boxes, what people say. You know, they say it's about the technology, not about the people. Well, sorry, about the people, not technology.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, sorry, I just agree. I think it's completely wrong.
But you know, this was true. It was truly co-designed. You know, the sepsis nurses, the infectious disease doctors, the deputy medical director, they designed what this system looked like. And then I had a bunch of very, very talented developers who built it. And it was really quite a special project. And when we touched on earlier about, you know, why do I work in the NHS? I think that's probably, to date, the pinnacle one, that you look at it and you think, wow, a couple of hundred people didn't die there. You know, there would have been a significant number without the technology bit on the top because of all the work that the clinicians have done in the transformation of the process and the practices and the avoided variation. But what we gave them was a tool that really enabled their vision. And yeah, that's probably my proudest one of them.
Amazing. So on the back of that, and I was going to ask this question in a different way. I was going to ask that, you know, was it hard to leave Liverpool? But I think from what you said before about, you know, on the 4-year cycle type thing, where, you know, you ultimately want to leave once you feel like you've made the big difference and you feel fulfilled in that role, personally fulfilled in that role. I suppose that's why it was probably a good time for you to move to Oxford.
Yeah, I mean, the time was right. I'd been in the joint role for over 4 years. I'd been in Liverpool for 6 and a bit years. I had offers to leave during my time there to both NHS and private sector. Both very, very attractive offers, and both weren't immediately dismissed. You know, there was a lot of thought that went into them. The timing wasn't right for either of those options. And there was lots of reasons for that. You know, having a child halfway through the process was one. I was quite emotionally attached to the Women's Hospital. And also we were building the new Royal. And I wanted to have on the CV that we'd built a digital first massive hospital. But then, you know, Carillion went pop, and that was sort of not the end of that, but at the end of that from a timeline perspective.
Yeah. Cool.
And the time was right to leave. It was the right time to go. We were going through the merger with Aintree. I had done everything that I wanted to do in the vision that you saw on the green screen presentation, apart from open the new hospital. And I was looking at the merger, thinking the merger was really exciting. Actually, there's really good opportunities from it. But what I would find myself doing for the next couple of years is redoing what I had done previously just at the Royal to get both hospitals up to the same level. And I didn't feel as though I had the appetite or drive to go through that again. And it was probably right for the organisation, right for me, that I moved on. But I only applied for the Oxford role. You know, the Oxford role came up. I applied for the Oxford role. I took the Oxford role. You know, I've only ever applied while I've been in post in Liverpool, the Welsh Ambulance or Chester. And if you discount the jobs that I ultimately went to, I've only ever applied for 4 jobs. 2 of those I didn't get in Chester and Wirral because of the band issue. And 2 others. I don't often find myself distracted by wanting to move, but Oxford was just too big a great an opportunity.
Yeah, of course, you know. And
even if the building hadn't gone pop, you know, and the building was still about to open, I would have still taken the Oxford job.
Yeah. It's got to be up there with probably some of the biggest digital roles in the NHS, right? The job you're in now. Does it get much bigger than that?
Well, I think size is a question of subjectivity, isn't it? I think it's certainly complex. It's certainly large.
But it's also the prestigiousness of the organisation. Oh,
absolutely. You know, it's Oxford. You know, I could go anywhere in the world to any conference and say I work at Oxford University, and they'll know where I am.
Yeah, of course, exactly.
So, you know, that's great for me from a personal self-satisfaction process, but actually it's also really good for Oxford, because we open doors and conversations, as do other prestigious organisations, based upon who we are and the opportunity of people wanting to be associated with us. From an organisational perspective, there would only be 2 or 3 in the United Kingdom that I would count in that level of prestigity, and I'm not going to name the others, but Oxford to me was always number 1.
Yeah.
So when it came up, I was like, I've got to apply for that.
Yeah, cool.
And then I got it.
So what's your role then? So you're the Chief Digital and Partnerships Officer. So talk to me about your role, because as far as I'm correct me if I'm wrong, it's completely unique to you and Oxford, isn't it?
I think it is in the context of merging the digital and the partnerships piece up. Lots of trust. So a director of strategic partnerships or strategy or partnerships exists at many trusts up and down the country. And there are a number of CIO board level positions up and down the country. There's probably not enough, certainly not aligning to the long-term plan vision. But there's a number of trusts with both. There's some trusts in Cheshire and Merseyside who have both. I'm not aware that there's anyone that's merged the 2 together. That's not to say that they necessarily haven't. So in effect, it's 2 portfolios with 1 hat. So it's 1 portfolio with regards to the digital transformation, enablement, and service delivery for the trust. And then it's 1 about the strategic partnerships that the trust needs to develop as part of the wider system, whether that be the ICS or the integrated care system or the place or the region. And fundamentally, the transformation that's needed to require to deliver the objectives of the long-term plan, which, let's be honest, is not uniquely, but majors on digital. There's not much I can think of that you're going to say, right, we're going to truly transform healthcare that hasn't got digital element to it. So the 2, I think, are natural bedfellows, but I don't think they're often associated roles.
Sure. So the partnerships role, is that partnerships within, so partnerships with the local council, partnerships with other local NHS organisations, the CCG, etc., as well as partnerships with the private sector, or not?
Well, we don't have partnerships per se with the private sector. We have strategic relationships with the private sector. It's really about the partnerships with, as you touched on, so whether that be health and social care providers, or Thames Valley Cancer Alliance, or we've got the LACRA, the care record piece. We've got the ICS or BOB, which is Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, and Berkshire. There's the third sector. It's basically the partners that are required to deliver the best quality care for the people of Oxfordshire.
Sure. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Okay, cool. So let's move on to something a bit more personal then. So, you've got a big role. You've got, fair to say, big pressures, huge responsibility. What do you do to unwind and relax? What do you do personally?
Well, I used to play golf, but I don't play golf much anymore. I'm nomadic as a golfer. I don't think I could I don't think I'm one of these people that could sit there and say, oh, I like to read books or I like to do this. And this is why I found COVID has been tough, not because, it's been hard, but in effect, what I like to do when I'm not in work is not think about work. And I often say this to staff, in either, just general chats or whatever. We all go to work to feel as though we've got a purpose and earn the money to do the stuff we want to do when we're not in work. And then, but I don't have a particular thing I can put my finger on, Jack. It's not like I've got a routine or anything. And this is why I found COVID hard, is because you can't really turn off from work, because you get home and turn the telly on and it's all about COVID. You go out 8 o'clock on a Thursday night and everyone's clapping you. And it's like, it's never ending. And so I don't think I've got one thing I can say helps me relax, but I do have some principles. So I have something which I call the Emmerdale rule, which is because Emmerdale's the only soap that I watch for record. And I'm not even ashamed about that. I love Emmerdale.
I was going to say, I'm very surprised you've admitted that. I
don't know why. To be honest, it should probably win an Oscar or 2. It's amazing. And but
I never would have had you as an Emmerdale watcher, to be honest.
I'm not a fanatic, don't get me wrong. I don't Sky Plus it, so when I come back from holiday I can catch up, and I won't go on to ITV +1+1 or something to watch the ones I miss.
I'm calling lies there. I'm calling lies. I bet you do. I bet you do.
No, I don't, honestly. But if it's on, I'll watch it, because
it's normally 7 o'clock that I'll sit down to eat my tea. So therefore, I associate sitting down with my tray, with my tea, and Emmerdale comes on. And so therefore, I have an Emmerdale rule from a work perspective, which is after 7 o'clock at night, unless it's apocalyptic, you shouldn't be sending emails to people. You shouldn't be texting people about work after 7 o'clock because they've got their own life balance. They've got their own personal time. Some people are a little bit obsessed with it. You know, they'll send out emails at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock. And I just don't think that's fair, because what you're doing is, come back to our email point before, you're discharging a responsibility for something you're asking somebody to do. You might not expect them to do anything about that till the next day. But if that email's pinged up on a member of staff's phone from a senior leader at 8 o'clock, they might feel compelled to start answering that email, or at least they're going to start thinking about it. And why is my personal time any less important or more important than their personal time? So I have a thing called the Emmerdale rule, which is at 7 o'clock, unless you're on call or unless it's apocalyptic, you don't send or do work. And that's my rule for relaxing, really. Then what I do after that is debatable.
So I didn't realise that your relax and unwind would be Emmerdale, but I like your Emmerdale rule, and I'm probably guilty of not sticking to it. So that's actually what you've said. There's actually really useful for me, because I didn't think about it in the way that you've just laid it out there, that the burden of work should be left after a certain time, and by emailing, although it can be dealt with in the morning, you know, people then feel obliged to answer or start thinking about it. So I think that was actually some good advice for me, and hopefully other people listening. So in the sense of you as a speaker, you're a brilliant speaker, and I know this because you've spoken at a number of my events, and it's not just me that thinks that. It's, you know, the feedback forms are really good. When did you realize you had a talent, or do you realize you have a talent for public speaking? And if so, when did you realize that?
I didn't realize I did. But what I did realize when I started doing it was that I wasn't nervous in doing it. I get anxious just before I go on, normally, that I'm going to forget my the key messages or the punchlines that I want to, you know, the sound bites that I want to get in. So I get that anxiety just before I go on and do any presentation. But I don't get a sense of nervousness when I'm up there. And I'm not sure that I would say I'm brilliant, but I would say I enjoy it. But there are times when I've gone and I've done some public speaking in non-corporate environments, whether that be, you know, reading a speech at a wedding or a eulogy at a funeral, and that's been dreadful. I mean, I'd like to say for the funeral, that was obviously the upsetness of the funeral, but
yep.
I wasn't good at that because it wasn't in my comfort zone. But, you know, when I go up to present, you may have noticed, I don't put much in the way of words on a PowerPoint presentation. If we go back to Pet 8, let's put that up there as number one.
Reading words from slides,
Well, if you're going to put 5 bullets up and then read the bullets, I mean, don't put the bullets up or whatever. I can read, you know what I mean? So because I tend to have pictorial aid memoirs to the message I'm trying to get across, I could do a presentation for you on a subject within my comfort zone every day of the week, and every presentation would be slightly different. They'll be different in length, they'll be different in narrative, but the sound bites will be the same, because I'll remember when I'm showing a picture of, you know, stethoscope, for example, that's the point to mention this.
Yeah.
So I make myself easy in the process by only having to remember the key messages and not worrying too much about the detail in between, because that just naturally flows. I think if you were to put me up and get me to do a presentation on something outside my comfort zone, you might have a different opinion.
Yeah, makes sense. Have you got any stories about speaking? Any times where it's gone wrong or gone extremely well?
Well, I've done some presentations where I tend to zoom in on a couple of people in the audience and just focus on those people. And I remember doing a presentation once, and the person who I managed to zoom up in when I was on stage had the body language. I mean, to be honest, there was a question at one point, I was thinking, oh, they've fallen asleep. And their body language was sort of shrunk. They were shaking their head at everything I said. Shaking, quite viciously shaking their head, rolling their eyes back on a few of the points. I was thinking, all right, it's not going well with this guy. So I sort of moved over to the other side of the room and focused on, people that were nodding and smiling and agreeing and etc. And then when the presentation finished, he came over and he goes, "That's the best presentation I've ever seen. Totally agree with you." And I was, I was thinking, well, you nearly ruined me when I was on stage, because I was really worried that I was pitching it wrong with the wrong audience. And I think the other thing that I've managed to do before now is put a presentation up and completely misjudge the mood of the audience, which I think is one of the things. It's an emotional intelligence thing, isn't it? If you're going on to do a presentation at 11:30, let's say one of your events, if it's a 11:30 till 12 o'clock, people are going to be getting a bit tetchy for lunch. So really, they want quite quick, snappy presentation at that. If you're doing a 9 o'clock and you're first on, you've got a little bit more freedom, people are a bit more awake. It's reasonably novel. They're having a nice coffee. And I think I have done some presentations before now where I've gone a little bit too technical and it was a non-technical audience. And conversely, I've done a very high-level strategic stuff to a bunch of techies who just looked at me like I was a lunatic, because they thought that they were there to hear about how to do something rather than why to do something.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're particularly funny anecdotes as such. I mean, I have fallen off the stage, so that could be quite a funny anecdote.
Fallen off the stage, did you say?
Oh, yeah. When I was walking off, I misjudged. I thought it was a double step, and it wasn't. I just went flat through the curtain.
I would have hated for it to have been there. I wouldn't have.
Well, to be honest, I was still live mic'd up, so the challenge was to try not to curse when I was doing it.
I want to ask a couple of questions before we finish, just about COVID and just kind of address that a little bit. Because I think, and this might sound weird initially, but just stay with me a second. I think COVID's been brilliant for the NHS in some ways. Take away the huge pressures, the deaths, the kind of misery and horribleness behind it, and the fact that it's a disease killing people. But what it's forcing NHS to do is remove politics, remove red tape, remove the barriers to kind of digitize and transform, and people be able to do stuff at pace and so on. So what's your thoughts on what I've said there? And disagree with me completely if you want to.
Well, I don't think you can disagree, but I would put a somewhat of a challenge up to say, weren't some of those barriers artificial anyway? What COVID's an absolute, tragedy. And, each one of those numbers that's flashed up on the bulletins each day is somebody's family, and it's horrible. And the pressure and stresses that it's put some of the frontline staff under is unimaginable, really. But what it has enabled us to do as a national health service is to effectively unite behind a common purpose. Now, the common purpose at the beginning was to free up enough ITU capacity to cope with a surge.
Yep.
So there was a common goal, a common purpose, a common piece. So therefore, you didn't have to cut through any competing objectives, or you might want to call that politics, but we'll call it competing objectives. However, and I think that's good. And I've gone on and on for years about how I wish we could do change quicker. Start small, scale fast, think big type methodologies. But I wouldn't want to carry on doing it at the pace we've done it over COVID either. I think that's been too quick. There's a little bit of a throttle back. But I think you're right in the sentiment, and I think the one thing that I think it probably has started to diminish, hopefully to the point where we can start having better conversations about transformation, is the often quoted thing about people don't like change and change fatigue and change, etc. Of course, it's a natural human instinct to be somewhat reluctant to change, but it's not a factor to stop transformation. And what we've got now is a set of examples, live examples of how we've managed to do that, but also how the patients have done that. The fact that I've got 83-year-old grandparents using a tablet on a ward to send a text message to start a agnostic video consultation with their grandkids at home, I think can start putting to bed a little bit the piece about, well, you can't have video consultation with the elderly.
Yeah.
We've got grandparents up and down the country who haven't seen their grandkids, who are seeing them on Skype, on Blue Jeans, on FaceTime, on Zoom, on plethora of video apps. People are getting used to it. And also, we've now got a scenario where as we've returned to normal, or the new normal, or whatever we're meant to call the post period, we're going to have cohorts of patients.
Would you say that we're in that post period time now? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think we've got patients now that will not want to come into hospital, that will want to be able to have the offering of a video consultation if it's suitable. It's not always suitable. Video consultation isn't the answer to everything. It's not a panacea that's going to sort everything. And as I touched on earlier, there's medicine is the most humanized profession. You don't want to lose that human element from the profession. And there are times when the doctor needs to put their hand on the patient. It's as simple as that. Or you would want to give bad news. You wouldn't do that over a attend anywhere call, would you? You want to do that. It may be in a different circumstance or surrounding. But on the same token, there are a lot of times where patients are coming into hospitals historically for an outpatient appointment because that's the way we've always done it. And what we've managed to prove ourselves is that's not necessarily how we need to do it. And some of the barriers to not doing it have now been sort of proven can be overcome. So I think it will enable future and faster, better transformation of the way we deliver care. And that will answer a whole set of other social questions. If you look at Oxford, beautiful city, the traffic's a nightmare. The traffic is an absolute nightmare in Oxford. It's got this strange situation where it has a ring road, and everything within the ring road is just clogged up, and everybody moves outside the ring road because it's cheaper to live. So in effect, it just gets more and more. The traffic is really, really bad, and I think it's one of the worst in the country for pollution. Actually, Oxford. And 86.2% of all statistics are made up. So I don't know what the number is, but there's going to be a large number of those people are either working at the John Ratcliffe, the Churchill, the Orthopaedic Hospital, or they're on the way for an appointment at one of the three hospitals. So the benefit from being able to offer a different solution to those patients for those appointments aren't just about convenience and cost and how do you put waiting rooms for 2-minute social distancing? But actually, it could have a massive difference with regards to our carbon footprint and our environmental issues. And I think hospitals, if I put my strategic partnership hats on, hospitals have a responsibility to act as an anchor organisation in their community. We will be the biggest employer in Oxford. So we have a responsibility to drive down our carbon. If we can drive down our carbon, the city gets better.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense. It's a different way of looking at it, but makes complete sense. Interesting. So where's next? Obviously not next because you're 6 months into your role, maybe over that.
7 months today. 7 months today, Jack. 7 months today. Not much
there we go. I feel honoured. I feel honoured to share your 7-month Oxford anniversary with you. Where do you see the future of kind of David Walliker in the NHS? Because you've got a love for it, right? And there's a clear passion for, and you said that you wouldn't leave for all the tea in China, you said. So there we go. It's on record now. If you leave, I'm playing this back to you, all right? But have you got aspirations to go, not that step further, because I think it's wrong to say that, but to be a CEO, for example?
Yes, that's my driving ambition. I mean, to be honest, I often question myself, why do I want to become a chief exec? Because most chief execs that I see, they always look, they've got the weight of the world on their shoulders. And you were saying earlier that you're speaking to James Devine.
Yeah.
I mean, he's quite young actually to become a chief exec, isn't he? But I'm sure if you bring him to some new conferences in 3 years' time, he might look a bit older. It's a pressurized job.
Yeah.
But I do. That's my personal goal and ambition, is to become a chief executive, not because of the status and the title, but actually I think I have, or I'm learning some ideas and methods and techniques and processes, which I think I would like to one day be able to openly implement to improve the way our hospitals run. So ultimately, yes, to become a chief executive, but I'm not even thinking about that for years yet.
Well, at least another 3
and
and a half, right?
I'm not ready for it either. I'm not ready for it.
Yeah.
And I'm at Oxford. Why would I go anywhere else?
Of course. Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. So, okay. So look, the final question I want to ask you, so it's a bit of a left field one. It's a hypothetical situation. and in this hypothetical situation, you have left the NHS. So you are now the CEO of a global consumer products company. And as the CEO, you've just released a new product and it's potentially going to change the world, but you've got to assemble the right board around you. So your first role, or your first job within your new role as the CEO of this global consumer products brand, is to assemble the last 3 members of your board. And on that, you have to hire a chief marketing officer, a chief commercial officer, and because it's your field, a chief information officer or a chief digital officer. Who do you choose, dead or alive, and not people that you've necessarily worked with, like celebrities or major influencers or entrepreneurs or whoever it might be? Who do you choose for those roles and why?
So there was a chief information officer. Which were the other 2?
So
Marketing
officer, a chief marketing officer, and a chief commercial officer. And you're the CEO.
Okay, I think my my chief commercial officer, I would appoint actually the director of finance that I had at Liverpool Women's Hospital,
okay,
who probably taught me the most in my career development. And she's now has left the NHS and runs a commercial company.
Okay.
And she was both inspiring, funny, intimidating, and formidable. So I would definitely have her on the board. For the chief information officer, I'd have my late uncle.
Okay.
Uncle John. So he was a vice president at a very large international storage vendor, very successful in that role over many years. He sadly passed away about 9 years ago now. But he was really when I found myself accidentally going into IT back in 1996 and thinking, I'm not going to stay here very long. And then I looked at Uncle John and I was like, well, he's done all right out of this, isn't he? So, yeah. And he was such an inspiration as a person as well. I would have him as my chief information officer. What he didn't know about IT wasn't worth not knowing.
Yeah.
And then I think for the chief marketing officer, do you know what, Jack? I would have the person that's behind the KFC Twitter account.
The what? The
KFC Twitter account.
The KSE? What's that?
The KFC, the Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Oh, the KFC. Right. Yes. What? Because of their recent nice try, but leave it to us campaign.
Well, I think a number of reasons. One, I think when they ran out of chicken, which let's be honest is a fundamental issue for a fried chicken company, I thought their marketing campaign to say, sorry, we ran out of chicken was both genius and funny.
Yeah.
But also, if you have a look at their Twitter account, they only follow 11 people. And the 11 people they follow are the Spice Girls and people whose names is hers, because it's the 11 herbs and spices that makes Kentucky Fried Chicken special. And I just think that's absolute genius.
Yep. No, it is.
So I'd have whoever is the brains behind that marketing, I would have on that board.
Well, there we go then. Well, David, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being so honest and open. And I've really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. I think the tone has been fun. And yeah, it's been a good Friday morning into afternoon.
No, it's been marvellous, Jack. But before you go, I've just realised one other bugbear. And if I don't get it down onto record, it's going to bother me. In fact, That might become a new bugbear. Right?
Yeah.
I can't stand it when people say PIN number. Because the N in PIN is number. So in effect, you're saying, what's your personal identification number? It's either a PIN or it's a personal identification number. It can't be a PIN number. And it just bothers me for reasons that it shouldn't.
So hold on a sec. So your three biggest bugbears. I get the first one, it's your name. But I definitely didn't expect that it would be milk bottle tops and PIN number would be your 2 bugbears, but there we go.
Well, if you ever go and buy me a bottle of milk, get the wrong colour lid and then text me to ask what my PIN number is, we're no longer friends.
There we go. There we go. Well,
great stuff. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely brilliant. Hi everybody, thanks so much for listening to that episode of the P&E podcast. If you like what you heard, please make sure that you share this episode via your social media channels, as it really does help us to gain traction in promoting this podcast series. Please make sure that you also subscribe to the channel that you're listening via, as you'll then get notifications as soon as we release our next podcast episode. Thank you.